welcome everyone to the global panel here on how a global team tackles world impacting problems with Django. So a lot to unpack there. We're going to kick it off with going around the room and doing a couple quick introductions, and then we'll talk about what the project was about, and then we'll dive into how a world-based team, a globally oriented team, can actually collaborate together. So again, if there's questions, don't hesitate to put them into the Slack channel. My name's Hendryx-Parker. I'm co-founder and CTO here at 6 Feet Up. And actually, I'm probably the least involved with the project that the other gentlemen on the call with me are going to discuss. But I'll be your moderator, question asker, make sure the flow goes guy. We're going to kick off, and I'll let folks give a quick introduction. We'll start on my Zoom with Thomas. Thomas, give a quick introduction. Tell folks who you are and maybe what role you played in the project.
So, hello, I'm Thomas Massmann. I'm based in Germany, Python developer since 2006, and I'm with 6 Feet Up now since end of 2021. My role in this project is the tech lead, and yeah, I have an international team now with me.
Yeah, so keep track of where everybody's at. So Thomas is in Germany and he's our tech lead. Umer, where are you at and what was your role?
Hi everyone, I'm Sohail. I'm based in Lahore, Pakistan, and I've been working with 6 Feet Up for more than a year now as a Python developer. My role in this project was earlier when we started off this project, and I was involved in the core functionality development. Yeah, when we kicked it off.
Awesome. So we've got Umer is in Pakistan. Andy, where are you at and what was your role?
Hi, I'm Andy Freede. I am the only member of the team who's located in the United States. I live in South Florida in Key Largo, and I am the senior project manager on the team. I joined 6 Feet Up last year in 2022.
Excellent. All right. And last but not least, Dave, tell us where you're at.
I'm based in Vancouver, BC, in Canada, and I'm a -9, I think, from Thomas. I'm a React developer on this project. Generally, I'm a senior Python developer, but for this one, this was my role, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I love that we've got Germany, Canada, Pakistan, and the United States. And I think if they all had to choose where they wanted to do an offsite meeting, my guess is we're all going to Andy's house. Because it does sound really nice. Now, the project we're talking about is actually one of our impactful projects. So we're talking about climate action and impact on the globe. Thomas, as a tech lead, can you just give us a quick description of like what the project was and like kind of why it became one of our impactful projects?
Yes, absolutely. So the company, they are building the future of energy storage systems. They are building grids, they're building the hardware, they have their own software that's running on the grid. And we help them to transition from their Excel-based sizing tool and configuration tool into a state-of-the-art web application using Django and React.
Yeah, so I remember some of the going back and forth with the Excel sheets. They were, yes. I think it was almost an inception of Excel formulas going on behind the scenes because numerous people had like meddled with it, played with it along the way. Who knows how many versions of this Excel sheet kind of existed, but ultimately moving this into the Django application, what did that do for the customer in the end?
It helps them to have a reliable source of truth for their calculations, for their data. So they have one place where they can store all the information, all their stack configurations. The sizing tool, the output is stored in the database, and they can review it, they can download the data, they can work with it, they can export it into their current workload that they still have as the Excel-based tool.
Yeah, and basically the client, while they may make battery systems, is not the kind of battery system you would buy for your house, if I understand them correctly.
Yes, they have battery systems that, or the storage is like multiple containers, a container size. Really, really big. And I think they have a couple of hundreds or thousands of megawatts what they already stored. So, yeah.
Right. Because for those of you who may be a global audience and don't know, the United States energy grid is not great. There's not a concept of storage in our grid. And if we could store it, we could actually impact how energy generation affects the climate, because we wouldn't need to do some of the practices we do today to account for surges on the grid and things like that. So I think that's one of the main reasons we considered this project as one of our impactful projects, is because it does have an impact on making energy production cleaner, allowing us to have less outages and things like that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's
Interesting. So that's the premise for this project, and we worked on it across, you saw that from all the way from Pakistan to British Columbia in Canada.
13 time zones.
Yeah, how many time zones is that?
13 time zones apart. Yeah.
13 time zones apart, which is interesting. It's not a huge team, but it was a very effective team. Actually, I'd like each of you to talk about your journey to remote work. I think the pandemic absolutely accelerated us all ending up maybe where we're at today as far as remote work. But was remote work your intention when you started out? And I'm going to actually start with Andy this time.
Sure. So remote work, I've actually been doing for quite a bit longer than the pandemic. And it really came from the first part of my career. I was living in Cincinnati, Ohio, and doing a lot of agency work. So I was doing a lot of web and software development, and some advertising and marketing work as well, typical agency work. But living in Cincinnati, right, if you're in business, you know the big dog in Cincinnati, client-wise, is Procter & Gamble. Doing a lot of work for Procter & Gamble, which was great because Procter & Gamble would hire an agency, get a contract. The agency would hire a lot of developers and project managers to support the Procter & Gamble work. Everything would be great for a couple of years, and then P&G would say, thanks for all the work, we're going to go with somebody else now. And they like to rotate their contracts around. So then the business would scramble, and they would lay off all the project managers and lay off all the developers, and everybody would scramble around in this merry-go-round of agencies looking for the next work to do. Said, I need to jump off the merry-go-round. And I said, I need to find work where I need to find a job that I'm not limited geographically to the business that's available or in the companies that are available to work for. And also I need to not live where just because I'm tied to a company. I really wanted to leave Cincinnati and move down to South Florida. And I said, the only way I'm going to do that is to find a company that's progressive enough to allow me to work from home and live where I want to live and still continue to do the business that I want to do. So I got my first work from home job about 8 years ago. 6 months after that, I moved down to the Florida Keys, and I've been living a happy life ever since. And I can live in the Keys and not have to work in a bar or a restaurant or a fishing boat. I can still keep doing the development project management work that I want to do. Yeah,
that's awesome. So Umer, you're in Pakistan. Had you worked remote most of your career, or is this a new journey for you?
It was a totally new journey for me. So I was working for like almost 4 years in an office for like a 9-to-5 job, and I have to admit it, I just hated it. I'm not that kind of guy. But when COVID came, there were a lot of more opportunities. Companies transitioned to remote work, and then I just started exploring and came across 60 and yeah, after that, it's been a really good journey overall for me. And I've just overall enjoyed my experience here.
Awesome. And Dave, all the way over in Canada, 13 time zones away.
Yep. I had worked for a company full-time based in North Vancouver, and I kind of got sick of the commute. So I started, amongst other issues, and then I decided I didn't want to work there anymore. But I ended up going back as a contractor, and working as a contractor was really nice. Then just by chance, I was on IRC one day, and our VP of engineering at the time came on looking for people, a little bit desperately looking for people, I think, at the time, because there was so much work. And just almost good fortune or chance, I ended up working at 6 Feet Up, and it's been great. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. How about you, Thomas? It was you've been remote with a remote team for quite some time, I think.
Yes, I'm basically doing remote since I started my first company in 2006. Started with customers in Germany and then expanded to Europe and the US. And I had quite some large projects or long-running projects also. from the US, from Central America, and with people, local people, and yeah, you can't do this in person all the time, so it's going to be expensive. So it's all remote.
Yeah, it's interesting. So let's talk about the collaboration aspect as we dive in on this specific project, talking about this energy company. Let's look at the obstacles first. I mean, it sounds like given 13 time zones, was this a problem, like to schedule meetings? I don't know if Thomas, you want to kind of start on maybe some of the difficulty. Being the tech lead, you're the one kind of in charge of keeping people moving in the same direction.
Yes, I'm kind of in the middle from the time zones, which is a really benefit here. But still, you have to manage like all the people from all the time zones and get everyone into the boat. What we ended up when I joined this project was to have then like we split some meetings. So we have early and later meetings, which helped out because not everyone has to be in the same standard like every day. So.
Yeah, I mean, Umer, since you're on the other side of this time equation, did you have to change or flex or adjust your working hours, or how did this work for you?
So it was pretty normal for me because I like to I like to stay up late. So I start working around the US time zone. So it was like perfect for me. So I didn't really have to do anything.
Yeah, so the interesting with the US time zones, like East Coast US time zone is very early for Dave. Dave, how did you handle the kind of time zone issue here?
I'm kind of a night owl, so it's been a struggle, but it's been good. It's worked out okay. Right now, it's after daylight savings. It's like 7 a.m. my time, and there are a bunch of 7 a.m. meetings. But generally, the team's been pretty good about having the meetings for the projects after 9 a.m. Or around that time. So it hasn't been too bad.
Yeah.
Client meetings, not for this project, but they could potentially be an issue for some.
Yeah, I mean, who's been handling most of the client meetings is mostly going to be, I assume, Andy and Thomas are going to be.
Tomas and I primarily handle the most of the client communication, and we've been using Slack for that. So we have a dedicated Slack channel that is specifically set up that the client is collaborating on that. So I mean, that using Slack in that manner of allowing the client in to the collaborative support channel in Slack has been super helpful in keeping the whole team up to date. That Umer is able to get in at the beginning of his workday and see the discussions we've had with the client the day before, and Dave can get on at his workday and see what has happened earlier in the day by keeping all that together. And Tomas and I can kind of be in the middle and respond to the client in real time. It's been very effective.
Yeah, it's interesting that something you brought up there is like you've talked about Slack, which is asynchronous, but when you're having synchronous meetings across 13 time zones, I never thought about the laws of physics too much, I mean, being that I'm mostly a software developer, but it seems like the speed of light could actually be an obstacle here to the Zoom meetings. I've just kind of noticed in being meetings with this group, you have to kind of time your words carefully because someone may still be talking or someone may be getting ready to start. Have you noticed that Zoom and the kind of just the fact that there's latency across the globe has been an issue in communication?
It has to some degree, yeah. There's times that it all depends on the individual network speed in the areas that we're living. There's times that we learn that everybody keep your audio on, turn your video off. And that way that'll help speed up things. Sometimes we drop Zoom altogether and switch to a Slack huddle. Sometimes Slack huddles will actually help speed things up over Zoom. So we try to stay adaptable. We try to be flexible in our communication and say, let's see what's working best for us today. And if this isn't working, let's jump over to this and keep the conversation going.
Now, have I missed any other obstacles in this, asynchronous global workplace? I think we kind of covered a lot of the ones we discussed earlier. Let's switch gears. Let's talk about benefits. I mean, I think one of the reasons 6 Feet Up moved to a fully remote, we don't even have an office anymore, was pandemic. But prior to pandemic, we had actually been very remote friendly. We had one of our first employees go remote probably as early as 2006 or 7, and it just, as the pandemic hit and we needed to grow the business and have more resources, it made sense to actually hire people from wherever. What are some other benefits you've experienced as part of this asynchronous work schedule? It seems like there's going to be some kind of like global coverage now on the project as people are developing. I think, from the morning, and maybe like, even though Umer says he works, US Eastern, he probably gets up a little earlier sometimes and maybe gets some work done. And Dave, being the night owl, may eke those hours closer to the night. Do Dave and Umer, do you guys ever meet on the other side, like the end of Dave's day, you've run across Umer?
There was a time this week where I needed to, it would have been nice to have somebody else to look at something. So I went away and I got my dinner and I did some exercise, and I came back in the evening and I pinged the developer. They were able to get onto it like 15 minutes later, and we could talk through the problem. And it was kind of nice because it's nice to get something like that finished before the end of the day. So there's been benefits that way too. Right,
and we've been adopting a more like pull request oriented, like Git workflow. I mean, how has that benefited the team? I mean, Thomas, from a tech lead standpoint, looking at the pull requests, have you seen a benefit to having a global team in a pull request?
Yeah, you have a lot of reviews. I mean, depending on who commits or who pushes and creates a pull request, you have always someone available to review it. It's not necessarily just me who needs to look at the PRs. So when I start, I'm an early bird. So when I start in the morning around 7 or 8 sometimes, I have a lot of pull requests sometimes from Dave, when he goes to bed, or he just pushes the latest changes. And so it's a seamless, seemingly it's a transition. So we can work like 24 hours almost. So
yeah, it's not like it's on purpose. It's not like we're forcing people to work 24 hours a day, but it seems like a very natural, we get to work within whenever your flow time might be for some of the resources on the team, even in such a small team. And it seems like that leads to a lot of benefits when it comes to like flexibility. I think some of us have, kids, or some of us have, spouses with other, schedules, and it's nice to be able to actually have dinner with them and not have, work interrupted. Now, another thing I want to point out is like, with going remote, I feel like the team has benefited from the wealth and just enormous skill set that actually exists in the global market. These are not typical offshore resources, even though Thomas, Dave, and Umer would be considered like offshore because they're not in the United States. They are, I think we've found top level resources at the global level, bringing the team together. I think we've gotten the ability to find people who are living in, I'll call them non-traditional, from a North American standpoint, non-traditional locations on this planet, but they're there because they want to be near family or near where they grew up, and maybe they at some point had lived. We had one team member who had lived in the United States for some time, ended up going back to Nepal, but then was able to work, just the same jobs he would have worked here in the United States. It seems like there's talent everywhere, and this remote has been allow us to leverage that talent wherever they exist. I mean, would you all agree?
Yeah, Calvin, exactly, and that kind of is the counterpoint to what I was saying when I was listing out the reasons why I wanted to go remote. I wanted to go remote so that I wasn't locked geographically to one company or one specific business. But when companies decide to go remote with their employees, that's freeing them up, that they are no longer locked geographically to one small talent pool that just happens to be living within a commuting radius of their office. They're actually opening up the talent pool to everyone in the world. And believe me, that makes getting those jobs a lot more competitive. When I started, if I'm changing jobs, now that I'm in the remote workforce, I find that, and I'm looking for another company that's hiring for remote employees instead of interviewing against the other 10 project managers that I already know, and I already know their skills and weaknesses because we're in the same geographic talent pool. Now I suddenly find myself competing against 300 project managers spread out all across the world. And so it really allows the company to get the best of the best when you go remote.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. I mean, Thomas, you've been working again with people who are South America and other regions that we haven't even mentioned here. Would you also say you've found some of the best talent on the planet?
Yes. I mean, when I work with or when I work with other companies, they had locals. So I was the one who was remote, but they were able to pick me at that time. And I was able to help them out and find a solution for their projects. But yeah, you can find a lot of talented people with going remote, and it doesn't matter where you start, where you do your education, where you do your studies, and then you have to move somewhere. So you're free. You can stay with the company, or you can join another company, and yeah.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Now, let's dive a little bit around culture. We've got people from very different backgrounds here, very different cultures, even though we all are sitting in the same Zoom room together. Has there been any hurdles or obstacles around culture between people on the team? And I'll let actually Umer, if you wanted to talk a little bit about kind of working with the other people's cultures. I tell you, I've honestly learned a lot from working with people in other cultures, especially like Umer and some of our team members that are in Pakistan. Has really broadened my horizons. But maybe I'd love to hear your reverse of that. Although I know you're pretty well versed in our pop culture.
Yeah, so I think working remotely has really broadened how you think. We're interacting with people from different, nationalities, cultures, and different countries. Really makes you think like what people actually are, and how you can interact with them, and you get to really learn a lot. Like you're not just collaborating with people that are like in your local area or your office. You are just interacting with everyone. Like working with Six Feet Up, I think I have interacted with almost like 5 or 6 different countries that I wouldn't have really interacted if I didn't go to remote work. But yeah, I think culturally it's been really enriching, and I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Some of the team members who are on this specific project, they may observe certain cultural traditions, and it's interesting to see people take a break during a meeting, or maybe they go off camera, or it just kind of like it flows, or we work around those cultural traditions to make sure that everyone can be accepted and still practice the either religious practices or cultural practices that they want to be able to practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if I'm in a meeting and I have to go for my prayer, then I would probably just ping everyone that I'll be back in like 5 or 10 minutes, and there's like no questions asked. Like everyone just understands and everything. So it's been that's the main point. Like remote work is one thing, but finding a company that understands you and respects your culture, your values, that's really amazing.
That's a super good point. That saying remote work is one thing, but finding a company that accepts you as a developer and accommodates the way you live your life, I think is really important. I mean, I don't know, Thomas, if there's anything that from your culture you've noticed that is kind of different. I'll make a hugely offensive stereotype and say that Germans can be fairly direct.
Yes. Yeah, that's yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm direct in what I'm saying, but I don't mean it in a mean way.
Right.
So you have to be careful about your language, about your tone, and but you learn a lot when you're working with a national team. And yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially when it comes to text-based communication. If you are strictly on Slack, there's probably nuances to speech and text and words that could be easily misunderstood. How have you worked to overcome that?
I mean, you can always add like smileys, or you can just have a quick call. Sometimes that's easier to solve some problems or to discuss some things.
Yeah.
But you have to remember that when you're on a call, that you take notes and you preserve it for the future, and not have everything just in a call and then forget about it in the next days or weeks.
Now, this specific project team, I do see them in Slack jumping into huddles quite frequently, which I think is a kind of a new behavior. I mean, it's also a newer feature in Slack. It's only been on for most folks for maybe under a year. Has the tools evolving changed the way you work? I don't know if Andy wants you kind of drive some of those.
Yeah. I would say that in companies that I've worked for previously, a lot of the communication has been more email based. So there were times where I've maybe sending 200 emails a day just to communicate back and forth with people and the clients, and with Slack has really changed the game in that I maybe only send 2 or 3 emails a week now, and all of my communication with everyone is updating in real time in Slack. And we've even pulled, as I mentioned before, our clients into Slack, and it's just made things super convenient that I'm not sending this client an email and maybe waiting a day for them to read it and respond. I'm sending my client a Slack message and knowing that they're getting it on the spot. And if they choose not to respond to it, then there must be a good reason why. Other than the fact that they just haven't gotten the email yet.
So Thomas, as the tech lead on the project, and if there's a lot of communication happening in a Slack huddle, how do you ensure that information gets conveyed to those who may not be in that meeting at that point in time?
You have to be very strict about taking notes, putting everything over. We have tools like Auto, for instance, that takes notes. So technology helps us here. So this has really evolved over the past years. When I first went into the remote work, we had phone conferences. So internationally,
Yeah,
so
right.
everybody had to dial in, and it was you had a bad reception, and it was horrible. So, but now we have the technology. You can start a Zoom call or a huddle just with a click. So that's.
Yeah. I'm glad the days of let's jump on a conference bridge for the weekend to do the prod release are gone. I feel like things move a lot faster now and smoother because of either the tools or the release processes, and the fact that we can release during the week and not have to wait for like a weekend maintenance window to be able to do those releases. I feel like that gives everyone their family time back, and they don't have to sacrifice that for the release of a project. But yeah, the conference bridges, I'm glad those have hopefully gone the way of the dodo. Although I heard the dodo is coming back. Someone said they did a genetic experiment, might be bringing that back. I'm not sure if that's going to end poorly, Jurassic Park style. Who knows? Hopefully not. All right. So Dave, you are not near Thomas when it comes to time zones, but he is the tech lead for your project. Has this caused any issues with you? Confusion after hours, you're working asynchronously, maybe more than some of the others?
I can't think of a time that it has. Some of those huddles that you've seen have probably been him offloading at the end of his day to set up the work that I need to do for the day. But generally, we have discussed things well enough, and the notes have been working well enough that it hasn't been a problem at all.
Interesting, and it's good to hear that, like that. At least the asynchronous communication seems to be working. I mean, how much of, because it's not like you're isolated just to this team. You work inside of a bigger company, and that company has a certain culture. How much of the company culture do you feel it contributes to the success of being able to work asynchronously?
It's good because we have a lot of, we'll say, not exactly work meetings where we get to know each other much better. We feel like we can talk to each other more openly because of that. We're not very strict about, you can only call at this time, or you should only chat through this way, or anything like that. It's fairly ad hoc, and it works pretty well. If we need a call, we jump on a call. If text messages work, or rather Slack messages work, we'll just use that. So we have it down pretty well that we'll use whatever works, and it does work.
Yeah, Andy, if you've been working remote prior to 6FET for almost 8 years, have you seen a difference in the cultures that has made one approach more successful than another?
Really, I would say that Zoom really changed the game. Once everybody started using Zoom, it was a huge game changer in collaboration, because I did work for companies early on where I worked for my first company that I worked for. I never actually found out what my manager's face looked like, because I did all of my interviews over the phone, and all of our meetings over the phone too. In fact, when I started working for the company, the first thing they sent me was my laptop and one of those big old clunky desk phones that had a speakerphone on it, and so all of our meetings were conference calls, and I got through that company never even knowing what the face of my manager was. Once we have made the transition into Zoom, it has really benefited the collaborative nature of working together as a team, because when you can actually see your coworkers and talk to them somewhat face to face and get the expressions on their face while you're talking to them, it really helps things, other than just sitting on a conference call and listening to a voice.
Yeah. How about you, Umer? I mean, going from being in an office and then working remote, that shift in like culture and getting to know your coworkers must be a little more tricky.
I think my first experience was 6FET, so it wasn't really that tricky for me. Like, everyone was so welcoming, and like everyone was so good with me. Dave mentioned that we still have meetings where we would discuss our personal wins for the week. They don't have to be like technical or anything. They can just be personal, like what you accomplished over the week or over the weekend. And we all really enjoy it. And then we also have a group where it's just like the GMT people, like the GMT time zone people, and then they can interact. And then anyone else is also welcome to come there and talk about your, what you're going to do for this week, what you do for the last week, stuff like that. So it's all just been amazing.
Yeah, we track on a Google map like pins where everybody is, and we've noticed over time the center of gravity of the 6FET world has shifted more toward GMT. So having a specific coffee time for those folks to get together was kind of eye-opening to me, that like there's lots of people. Not that it wasn't obvious that there were lots of people over there, but like they would like to have their own social times, and they made it happen. I don't think that wasn't driven from the top. That was driven by the folks who were like, I'd love to get together and just have coffee with people who are in Pakistan, India, Nepal, and Philippines, and the Australian even. Which essentially we had an Australian on the team, and he would do biphasic sleeping. And if you've never heard of biphasic sleeping, he would go to bed with the sun, wake up sometime in the middle of the night, work for like 4 hours, go back to bed, and then get up with the sun. I don't prescribe that anyone should do that. It sounds challenging, but that seemed to work for that individual. And I think, again, if you have those kinds of wishes and desires to do that kind of work schedule, more power to you. And I feel like the remote work empowers folks to do that. If anyone has questions, please feel free to drop them into the Slack chat. There's been a couple comments in there, but no big questions there. We will probably go one more round. Actually, I'll do one more question to everybody, and then we'll head over into the face-to-face room if folks from the audience actually want to come in and chat with this group directly. So we'll go around one more time and say, if there's anything you could change about working remote on this project, what would it be? So I'll give you a moment to formulate your answers. I will actually, Andy, I'll start with you, since you're doing a lot of the coordinating, a lot of the organizing. Well, if you had a magic wand, what would you change on the project?
If I had a magic wand, I would change the location. I would change the location of the client from being on the West Coast Pacific time to the East Coast in my time, because there's so many times that they wait for the end of their day to hit us up with a bunch of stuff that needs urgent attention. So so that's either something that Dave is going to have to see in real time because he's also there on Pacific time, or it means I'm going to have to make the long journey from my couch in the living room over to my home office at 8 o'clock at night to see what the client's hitting us with next.
Yeah. All right, Dave, since you got mentioned in Andy's wand waving, what would you change about the project?
For this project, I don't think there's really anything I would change. It's working pretty well. I would say for maybe some other projects, it's exactly the same answer. The client being somewhere else has the potential to lead to very early meetings.
Do you think I'll ask you this kind of follow-up question. Do you think, and Andy, feel free to chime in as well, do you think there's an expectation from the client that because you're available on Slack or so immediately, although asynchronously, that you're going to respond right away?
I haven't noticed that, but then the clients I've worked with have generally been very good about themselves clocking out at 5 p.m. or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I haven't noticed that myself.
All right. Thomas, as tech lead, if you're magic wand and you could change one thing about the remote nature of this project, what would it be?
The same as Andy said. Yeah. Especially for me, because I'm in Germany, and when I go to bed, when I stop my day, usually having kids, it's I don't work too long, but they start their day, so it's you have an overlapping time, but it's really hard because if they have questions, if you have to organize things, make decisions, it takes a day or two, because then you have questions again, you need to confirm some things, and that's going to be challenging. But having a great team, we always have someone who can answer and who can ask the right questions and help the client out.
Awesome. And Umer, given your magic wand,
I don't think I would change anything. I can just meet with Thomas, Andy, or Dave, and they can just brief me what they want to be done, and I can just get it done.
the ultimate in flexibility. Well, excellent. Yeah. So if anyone out there has questions for us, we will be over in the face-to-face room. Andy or I will paste the link into the Slack channel. You can also just head over to the sidebar and click the link for the face-to-face and join us for a few minutes of a quick conversation, or any kind of questions you want to ask, or any experiences you'd love to know more about. I want to thank our amazing panel for being with us here today during Python Web Conference. I know I had to twist a few arms, but I think everyone did a great job. And I want to thank you all for participating in this panel. And I also want to thank you all for being amazing and remote people who have built an impactful project for 6 Feet Up for one of our clients.